No dramatic outbursts, no shouting, no dishes thrown, just flawless silence and a frozen smile. He had waited a long time, years of jabs, jokes that seemed harmless but were sharpened into weapons. Evenings where he wasn't a husband, but raw material for her stand-up routine. She called it humor. The guests laughed, and he swallowed the shards of his pride behind a smile. But everything changes, especially when the victim stops playing by someone else's rules. That evening, she would slip into her best dress, apply her makeup, and believe it was a celebration in her honor. There would be clinking glasses, laughter, memories, and a trap she'd walk into in heels. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watch this video. I value every one of your comments. So let's get started. Have you ever come to the gut punch realization that your partner doesn't just toss out careless words, but deliberately crafts verbal grenades for sport? That truth hit me like a brick wall one evening, in a moment that rewired my entire perspective. What was supposed to be a relaxed dinner with her old college crew turned into the night I finally saw just how frayed my patience had become. We were in one of those fancy places where napkins are folded like origami and the lighting is dim enough to hide your disappointment. The atmosphere was lively, with clinking glasses and light laughter. That was until the conversation turned to relationships and intimacy. Most couples laugh and pretend they don't understand anything, but not my wife. She took the hint and threw herself into her work, as if she were auditioning for a special comedy show. "Oh, girls, you wouldn't believe what I deal with at home," she declared, voice theatrical as she wiggled her pinky for dramatic flair. "Let's just say I've seen more impressive appetizers." The table erupted, the kind of laughter that makes people slap the table and wheeze. Her friends were losing it, and I was the unwitting centerpiece of her one-woman roast. This wasn't a first, either. She had a habit, a long-standing one, of making our intimacy the punchline of her act. No occasion was sacred. Thanksgiving dinners, company mixers, neighborhood cookouts. She wielded private moments like props, eager to get a reaction. Every time, she brushed it off with a breezy, "Just joking," while I stood there, piecing together whatever pride she'd chipped away for the sake of a cheap laugh. But that night, it wasn't like the others. Watching her light up as their laughter echoed, something inside me broke. This wasn't playful teasing. It was deliberate, a slow, meticulous tear-down of my self-worth dressed up as humor. She wasn't just laughing, she was savoring it. Then came the follow-up, a final twist of the knife. You know how they say guys with monster trucks are compensating? Well, mine drives a compact. You can connect the dots. More roaring laughter. Her audience was eating it up. And me? I smiled like a trained actor, all while replaying every similar scene where she'd left me humiliated, one smirking joke at a time. This wasn't a one-off. It had been years in the making. Quiet stings that added up to a relentless stream of mockery. When we got home, she kicked off her heels, flopped onto the couch, and laughed like she'd just crushed a sold-out performance. That pinky line was gold. "I swear, I missed my calling," she said, still basking in the afterglow of her set. That's when clarity hit me, cold and final. This wasn't immaturity or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was who she was. She genuinely believed that ridiculing me was fair play, and worse, that it was funny. I stood there watching her scroll, no doubt texting highlights of the night to her friends, maybe even fishing for material for next time. And in that moment, I made a decision. This marriage, it was over, beyond salvaging. But when you've spent years being laughed at, you don't just slink away quietly. No. Some exits require a little emphasis. Some people need to feel exactly what they've inflicted. I didn't go to sleep angry. I went to sleep resolved. While she dreamed up her next set of zingers, I was sketching out something far more satisfying. If she was determined to turn my dignity into a joke, I would return the performance, with added flair. By morning, I felt something I hadn't in years: direction. While she slept off her wine and laughter, I brewed my coffee and sat down with purpose. And that purpose started with gathering intel. You see, my wife had always loved to overshare, especially when the topic was her own past. Back when we were still in that vulnerable get-to-know-you phase, she spilled everything. Humiliating stories from her teens, the acne that followed her into college, the time she peed herself mid-speech, her infamous bra-stuffing mishap, even the cruel nickname that stalked her for months. At the time, she thought it brought us closer. What she'd actually given me was a blueprint, a treasure map of vulnerabilities. I powered up my laptop and began compiling. Every awkward confession, every shame-soaked memory. Then I turned to social media. Within 2 hours, I had tracked down 6 of her high school classmates, all of them. Barely a challenge. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would throw her a surprise reunion, a toast to our love, something sweet and unexpected. But beneath the smiles and glasses of Pinot, I'd engineer a reckoning. She would stand in front of the very people who knew her history, and then she'd feel what it's like to be exposed, not mocked in jest, but truly seen, with every mask peeled back. That moment at the restaurant, that was the spark. She thought this was a game. Fine, game on. She would see me as the epitome of devotion, a loving husband going to extraordinary lengths to show how much she meant to me. What she wouldn't see was the truth, that every element of this event had been calculated to summon the ghosts of her past. Every awkward silence, every whispered insult, every moment she'd ever felt inadequate or overlooked, it was all part of the plan. I started with the guest list. I contacted her old crew, weaving a heartfelt narrative about throwing a surprise celebration in honor of our marriage. I told them how deeply I loved her and how I wanted to bring together the people who had once filled her life with meaning. They didn't question it for a second. Each one bought into the sentiment, convinced it was one of the most romantic things they'd ever heard. While I coordinated with her former friends behind the scenes, I carefully kept up appearances at home. I brought her flowers just because, complimented her cooking, and hung on her every word when she talked about her day. She basked in the attention, completely unaware of the trap being set. "You've been so sweet lately," she whispered one night as we cuddled on the couch. "It's like we're falling in love all over again." I kissed her gently on the forehead. "Just showing you how much you mean to me," I replied. If only she had known the real reason behind my affection. The reconnaissance phase was absolutely essential. I spent countless hours digging through her old yearbooks hidden in the back of the closet, deciphering scribbled messages, scanning every photograph. I memorized the names of the kids who had tormented her. I located the exact brand of acne cream she used to hide in her locker. I even found the song that played during her most mortifying prom moment. Every detail mattered. This wasn't going to be some overt act of revenge. It was going to be quiet, surgical, unrelenting. She would relive every wound she'd ever inflicted on me without realizing the source, at least not until the damage was irreversible. I booked the same community hall where her school dances had taken place. I sourced decorations that matched her graduation year exactly. I hired a DJ who specialized in retro tracks, curating a playlist designed to stir up the most uncomfortable nostalgia. The food was a crucial touch. I remembered her once admitting how self-conscious she'd been about eating in front of others back in high school, thanks to years of body image issues. So I made sure the menu mirrored those cafeteria lunches, the same bland, processed meals, served in identical trays. It was all designed to transport her back to that fragile version of herself she thought she'd outgrown. But the crown jewel of the entire setup? The games. I planned icebreakers that would naturally guide the conversation back to high school memories, truth or dare. Remember when? Prompts. Yearbook, quote, trivia. Everything cloaked in light-hearted nostalgia, but designed to dig deep and pull old insecurities to the surface. 2 weeks of meticulous planning. 2 weeks of playing the perfect partner while orchestrating her emotional undoing. She had no idea that every kind word, every lingering hug, every seemingly thoughtful act was part of a masterfully choreographed act. The night before the big event, she was practically vibrating with excitement. She spent hours choosing a dress, perfecting her makeup, and styling her hair as if she were stepping into a time machine bound for senior prom. "I still can't believe you did all this for me," she said, her face glowing in the mirror. "This is going to be the most magical night ever." I stood behind her, gently resting my hands on her shoulders as our eyes met in the reflection. "It's going to be unforgettable," I whispered. She didn't realize just how right I was. The evening played out exactly as I'd scripted, a near-perfect replica of a high school reunion, soaked in artificial warmth. The community hall looked like it had been preserved in amber, same cheesy streamers, same faintly musty scent clinging to the air. Her old friends started to arrive around 7. There were squeals of delight, long hugs, and genuine surprise. Most hadn't seen one another in years, and the emotional energy was real. She looked radiant, gliding from one familiar face to the next like the star of a sentimental teen drama. "I can't believe you pulled this off," she kept saying, clutching my arm like she needed to remind herself it was real. "This is incredible. You're incredible." And I stayed perfectly in character. The doting husband, the gracious host, the man who just wanted to see his wife smile. I kept drinks flowing, chatted with her friends, and never once let the mask slip. But the whole time, I was surveying the room, waiting for the right moment to begin the next phase. The first hour was all surface-level chatter. Who got married, who had kids, who moved away. Just enough time for everyone to relax, to forget they were being manipulated. And then I gave the signal. "Hey, remember this one?" I said to the DJ, nodding subtly. He queued up a very specific song, the one that had played the night she stumbled on stage at prom, tripping over her heels as she accepted a meaningless award. The reaction was immediate. A few of the women laughed softly, exchanging glances as the memory returned. Her smile wavered for a split second before she covered it with a practiced laugh. "Oh my God, prom," she said. And just like that, the past had come calling. One of her friends let out a burst of laughter. "That night was an absolute disaster." "Maybe for you," another replied with a smirk. "Some of us actually held it together." My wife laughed along with them, but I caught the way her eyes tightened just slightly, a flicker of discomfort, barely noticeable unless you were looking. It was the first hint of a fracture beginning to form. Then came the decorations. I'd spent time arranging photo displays around the room, group shots, recent memories, but I'd also slipped in a few gems from their most cringe-worthy phases. Everyone gushed over how adorable they all looked in the old pictures, but I had made certain that the most mortifying ones of my wife took center stage. Photos from the year she struggled with her weight, that notorious school picture where her skin was red and peeling from acne meds, and even a newspaper snap that caught her mid-sneeze, utterly ridiculous. "Hey, hon, check this one out," I called out with a grin, motioning to the worst of the bunch. "You were such a cutie," I added. Her friends gathered around, curious. I watched her reaction closely as her uneasy smile started to falter. She quickly shifted their attention to someone else's photo. "Everyone had those awkward years," she said, but her voice lacked its earlier cheer. Next came the culinary centerpiece, a full recreation of their high school cafeteria menu. Right down to the divided plastic trays and those dreaded tiny milk cartons. "This is hilarious," one friend laughed. "It's like we're back in 10th grade. Remember how weird we used to be about eating?" another added, looking straight at my wife. "You used to eat in the bathroom because you didn't want anyone watching you." The room quieted for a beat. My wife's cheeks turned pink. "That was ages ago," she said quietly. "Aw, don't worry," I said with a warm chuckle. We've all had our hang-ups. It's kind of sweet how much you've grown since then. But the air had shifted. I could sense it. Her friends weren't seeing her as the confident woman they knew, but as the insecure teenager she used to be. And I wasn't done yet. The games I'd planned were up next, each one designed to tug at old memories, each prompt aimed carefully at soft spots she'd rather leave buried. Remember when your bra stuffing attempt backfired and tissues went flying during gym class? One friend blurted during a lively round. My wife turned pale. Can we not talk about that? Oh, come on. Another chimed in through laughter. The entire gym saw it. It was hilarious. It wasn't funny to me, she snapped, her voice trembling slightly. I said nothing, just watched from my spot with a drink in hand, cataloging every response. It was poetic justice, really. Exactly how I felt whenever she mined our relationship for stories to amuse her friends, leaving me feeling exposed and stripped bare. The evening was going exactly as I'd envisioned. She was no longer the vibrant host, confidently working the room. With every passing memory, she seemed to shrink, her posture closing in, her voice growing quieter. Her friends, lubricated by nostalgia and wine, grew louder and more reckless, just like she used to when she turned my private life into anecdotes for laughs. By 9 p.m., she was tucked away in a corner, disengaged, her energy drained. The woman who once lit up any gathering had faded, replaced by the hesitant, self-conscious girl she thought she'd left behind. And the best part? The night's main event hadn't even begun. By 10 p.m., the whole vibe had shifted. What started out as a fun reunion now felt like group therapy none of them had signed up for. Buried memories were bubbling to the surface, and not all of them were welcome. Time to raise the stakes. You know what we should do? I said, clapping my hands like an eager camp leader. Let's play truth or dare, just like the good old days. Some friends lit up immediately, giggling with anticipation. Others hesitated. My wife's expression said it all. She looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. I'm not sure that's a good idea, she said cautiously. We're not teenagers anymore. Oh, come on. It'll be fun, I said, with an exaggeratedly sweet grin. What could possibly go wrong? Famous last words. We pulled the chairs into a circle. I made sure she was seated dead center in full view, her usual spot when she was the one directing the spotlight. The first few rounds were light and harmless, silly questions, playful dares, easy laughs. But she sat stiffly, like someone bracing for a wave. Then one of her tipsy friends leaned in, a little too eager, ready to dig deeper. Okay. Truth, she said, her finger locking in on my wife like a guided missile. What's the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you in high school? The air was sucked out of the room. My wife froze, her face flickering through confusion, unease, and then landing squarely on panic. Can I just take a dare instead? She asked, already hoping for an escape hatch. Her friend grinned like a cat with a trapped bird. Sorry. You picked truth. No backing out now. I leaned back in my seat, amused. This was better than cable. Pure, unfiltered drama. My wife squirmed, visibly caught in the crosshairs, before finally mumbling, "Prom." I fell. It was awful. One of her friends snorted. That's weak. What about the senior presentation? You didn't realize your period had started until someone noticed the stain on your white skirt. Nervous laughter rippled through the group. My wife's face flushed a deep red, nearly identical to that infamous skirt. Oh, please remember homecoming? Another added. You puked on yourself after that sketchy buffet. Classic. All right, that's enough, my wife snapped, her voice tight and on the edge. But it was like turning off a faucet mid-flow. The stories just kept pouring. They dredged up every moment she probably wished had stayed buried, bleeding through gym shorts, tearing her pants when bending down for her books, the time she accidentally called the teacher Mom and earned school-wide infamy. I said nothing, just watched, soaking it in. The same helplessness she had once drawn out of me with her jokes and anecdotes was now painted across her face. That raw vulnerability, knowing your private past is being dragged out for entertainment, yet being powerless to stop it. "Hey, remember what everyone used to call her?" one friend asked, grinning. My wife flinched like she'd been slapped. "Please don't," she said, almost too quietly to hear. "What nickname?" I asked innocently, though of course I already knew. "Leaky," her friend said without hesitation. "She had a bit of a bladder control problem back then." My wife bolted to her feet. "I need a minute," she said, and headed for the bathroom. I followed, closing the distance before she could lock the door. "Hold on," I said. "You don't want to miss the rest." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Can we please just leave?" "But the cake," I said, voice gentle, falsely concerned. "I went through all this trouble for you." Behind us, the laughter rolled on, oblivious, innocent in its cruelty. But they weren't just friends reliving teenage disasters. They were chess pieces in something far more deliberate. I guided her back to her seat with calm persistence. "Just a little longer," I whispered. "You won't want to miss what comes next." The game continued. More truths, more alcohol, more forgotten stories dragged into the light. The harsh skincare regimen that left her with raw, peeling cheeks. The time she was caught pocketing lip gloss at the mall and had to call her parents from mall security. The teacher she had a painfully obvious crush on, who never even noticed. With each new reveal, her carefully crafted confidence began to crack. This woman, who had always mined our private life for punchlines, was finally getting a taste of her own medicine. Leaning in close during one particularly cruel round of laughter, I murmured, "This is what you do to me. Every time you turn my life into a comedy routine." She turned to me, eyes wide, not just surprised, but seeing it for what it really was for the first time. This wasn't some accidental turn of a party game. It was intentional, precise. Justice, wrapped in tinsel. By 11:30, I decided it was time to close the loop. Tapping my spoon against my glass, I stood. The room hushed instantly. "Ladies," I began with a practiced smile, all affection and warmth. "May I have your attention for just a moment?" My wife stared up at me, torn between praying for a reprieve and fearing a deeper plunge. "I want to propose a toast to my amazing wife," I said, sounding every bit the loving husband. "Tonight, I brought together the people who knew her back when she was becoming who she is." There were nods and clinking glasses. Her friends were still under the illusion this was a celebration. "What I admire most about her," I continued smoothly, "is her special talent. She can take someone's most private, vulnerable experiences and spin them into wildly entertaining stories." There was a pause, a few nervous chuckles. "She's bold like that. Nothing is too personal, too sacred, too painful to be repurposed for laughs." People exchanged glances. The vibe shifted, and that's when she truly saw it. This wasn't a party. It was a reckoning. And it was far from over. "I'll give you an example," I said, locking eyes with my wife. "You rarely pass up a chance to turn the private corners of our relationship into public entertainment." She had this recurring bit she loved, mocking my body like it was a prop in her stand-up routine. Whether it was a dinner out, a holiday gathering, or a casual hangout, any crowd became her audience. The color drained from her cheeks. "Don't do this," she said, barely above a whisper. "But darling," I replied with a feigned look of confusion, "I thought making our personal life a punchline was your favorite form of recreation. Isn't that what you're doing every time you lift that little finger and laugh about my so-called quirks?" Silence clamped down on the room. Her friends, who'd been laughing minutes ago, now sat paralyzed, realizing this wasn't a joke gone sideways. It was a moment of reckoning. Just a few nights earlier, she'd held court at a reunion dinner, drawing chuckles by comparing me to bite-sized vegetables and making snide remarks about the type of cars compensating men drive. I continued, voice even and measured, which only made the atmosphere more brittle. They were in hysterics while I sat quietly, swallowing each insult. Like always. Her eyes began to glass over, but I wasn't done yet. So I figured I'd try a different approach tonight, reverse the roles, give you a taste of your own performance, only this time, you're the subject. I gestured to the people seated around us, her circle of friends, now looking anywhere but at her. All the vulnerable stories shared tonight, your awkward teen years, your fears, your deepest embarrassments. That's what I feel every time you decide I'm comedy material. Her tears had begun to fall. A dawning awareness washed over her. You planned this, she murmured, shaken to her core. With the same attention to detail you give to my humiliation, I replied without hesitation. But here's the thing, I added, my voice calm but resolute. This is a one-time show. You, on the other hand, have been on tour for years. One of her friends tried to interject, awkwardly offering, maybe we should move this conversation somewhere more private? I held up a hand to silence her. No need. We're exactly where we should be. My wife prefers to stage our personal matters in front of an audience. It's only fitting we stay on script. Then I turned back to her, now hunched over with her face buried in her hands, and delivered the final blow. Tonight, you finally experienced what it's like to be reduced to a joke, to have your pain mined for entertainment, to sit powerless while others decide your story's worth as punchline. I let the stillness in the room speak for me for a moment. But the key difference, I said, is that the people here actually care about you. If they knew their laughter hurt you, they'd stop. When I told you the same, you dismissed it, told me I was too sensitive. The room had fallen so silent, even the low hum of the air conditioning felt deafening. So here's to my wife, I said, raising my glass, who taught me that humiliation is hilarious, as long as it isn't hers. I took a long sip, then calmly placed the glass back on the table. Now then, who's ready for dessert? I saved something special. She looked up through her tears, and for the first time in all our years together, I saw it. True fear. The sudden realization that I wasn't playing along anymore, that this time I was serious. I walked toward a small side table where I'd discreetly placed an envelope earlier that evening. As I picked it up, I saw her confusion give way to dread, the kind of dread that only comes before a twist in a movie you didn't see coming. Her friends stayed seated, unsure whether to intervene or vanish. Ladies, I said, holding the envelope aloft like a magician before the big reveal. I promised something sweet. I always deliver. Returning to the table, I set the envelope down in front of her. Her hands trembled as she stared at it, as if it might explode at her touch. Go on, I said gently. This is the grand finale. Her eyes pleaded with mine. Please, don't do this. Do what? I asked, my voice dripping with mock innocence. I thought you loved surprises, like the one you pulled at dinner last week, your little improv routine, remember? Her friends shifted in their chairs, visibly uncomfortable, whispering among themselves, uncertain what to do, or whether to even stay. When she hesitated, I leaned in and spoke loud enough for all to hear. You've got two choices. Open the envelope yourself and hold on to whatever dignity you still can, or I open it and we really put on a show. Either way, tonight it's happening. Her fingers fumbled with the seal. She tore it open and pulled out the contents, finalized divorce papers, already signed. The silence was suffocating. Congratulations, I said with a falsely bright tone. You're now free to crack jokes at anyone's expense any time without worrying about me getting in the way. She stared at the documents, uncomprehending. I don't understand. It's not difficult, I said, addressing everyone now as though concluding a seminar. For years, my wife has treated me like her personal comedy material. Our intimacy, my body, my pride. She's made it all public domain. I began pacing, my gaze sweeping slowly across the room, locking eyes with each guest. She's shared details that weren't hers to share. She's mocked me to relatives, to colleagues, to strangers at parties, anyone who'd laugh. By now, she was sobbing, her body trembling. But I still had one last thing to say, and I wasn't going to leave it unsaid. Each time I begged her to ease up, each time I tried to put into words the hurt she was causing, she'd dismiss me with a smirk. "You're overreacting," she'd insist. "It's just a joke. Don't be so dramatic." I stopped walking and turned to face her squarely. But tonight, for the first time, she felt a fraction of the sting she'd so casually inflicted on me for years. Just once, so she'd finally understand. One of her friends eventually broke the awkward silence. "Isn't this going a little too far? Maybe you two should try couples counseling or something?" I gave a dry, humorless laugh. "Counseling? Really? You think this is about miscommunication? This is about something much deeper. It's about respect, about not turning the person you claim to care for into the punchline of your private comedy routine. It's about realizing that making light of someone's pain isn't playful, it's vicious." I bent down and retrieved the divorce papers she had accidentally dropped. These weren't just forms, they were a proclamation of self-respect. I should have signed them long ago, but some naive part of me clung to the hope that she'd change, that she'd recognize the harm she was causing. I scanned the faces of her friends. Not one of them could meet my eyes. So let me leave you with this. If someone tells you your jokes are cutting them too deeply, take them seriously. Because one day, they'll stop laughing. They'll start planning their way out. My wife was now sobbing uncontrollably, her body trembling. But inside I felt nothing. No guilt, no sorrow, no second thoughts. Just a sharp, unmistakable clarity. A feeling of reclaiming what had been stolen from me, piece by piece over the years. My voice was calm, unwavering. "The divorce? It's already in motion. While you were getting ready for your little event tonight, I quietly took what mattered and moved it out. I've untangled our finances. I've signed a lease. I have a new home." She looked up at me, wide-eyed and desperate. "Please, we can work this out. I'll stop, I promise. Just tell me what you want." And that, I told her, is the root of the problem. You still think this is about what I want from you. It's not. It's about what every person should receive without begging, simple human decency. And the fact that you're only offering it now when your comfort is on the line tells me everything I need to know. I straightened my coat and cast one last glance around the room. "Well, ladies, I appreciate your presence tonight. I think we all came away with a valuable lesson." I turned toward the exit, but paused just before stepping through the door. And to you, next time you feel the urge to tear someone down to get a laugh, remember this night. Remember what it felt like to be exposed while others watched in silence. I gave a faint smile as I opened the door. Think of this as my parting gift, to you and to the person who follows. I walked out of that hall with my back straight and my pride intact, leaving behind a stunned room, and a woman who finally realized that cruelty comes with consequences. The most satisfying part? I didn't have to yell. I never lost my temper. I didn't stoop to her level. I simply let her see herself clearly, maybe for the first time. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is hold up a mirror and let the truth speak for itself. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.